Ruth is a Moabite woman from the land of Moab, and she marries into a Hebrew family, the family of Naomi and Elimelech. And so they have two sons, and they are Hebrew people. They are from this lineage of promise that we've been studying about. And they leave their town of Bethlehem. Isn't that going to be amazing? They leave their town of Bethlehem because there is a famine. And they move to the country of Moab, in which their sons are raised, and they marry Moabite women. And unfortunately, both Elimelech and Ruth and Orpah's husbands, the sons of Naomi and Elimelech, die. And so these three ladies are left as widows. And in this time, being a widow is the least of all people. There was no provision for these ladies. There was no way for them to secure a livelihood. They were destitute and overlooked, and they were in a foreign land, not to Ruth and Orpah, but to Naomi. She knew no one here. There was no way for her to advocate. There was no way for them to be redeemed, except through what they called a kinsman redeemer. This was a family member who would rise up and take over the responsibilities for the husbands who had passed. It was someone from their family, someone from their lineage that would come forward, and then they would assume the responsibility for them. But Naomi could have none in Moab because this was a foreign land. This was a pagan land. And so she decided to leave and to go back home, a place where hopefully some family would step up. Orpah decides to stay in Moab, where her family is. But Ruth decides to stay with Naomi, to travel with her back to her land of Bethlehem. And she says some beautiful and poignant words that many of us hear in weddings, that your people will be my people, Ruth says to Naomi, and your God will be my God. Ruth had seen the faith of Naomi and Elimelech's lineage. She knew that their God was the true God. And so they journeyed together back to Bethlehem. And amazingly, through God's provision, Ruth decides to go out to a field and to begin to glean. And gleaning would be taking up the margins of a field of wheat or whatever crop was happening in harvest at that time. And so people would leave a little bit of margin. God had told the Hebrew people to not go all the way to the ends, but to leave a little bit, some leftovers, the very edges, whatever was left on the ground, leave that for some of the poor, for the foreigners, for the workers. Leave a little bit extra for them. And so Boaz has a field, and Ruth begins to glean there. And incredibly enough, Boaz is a part of Naomi's family. He sees Ruth gleaning in the fields, and his eyes of faith, his heart's eyes, see her. And he says, be careful and leave a little bit extra for her. Come to find out, he is the kinsman redeemer. He is the one that God has appointed to take care of Ruth and Naomi. He is one who can step forward and redeem these destitute widows and bring them back into family, bring them back into a place of provision and protection. And so as we look today in Ruth, the book of Ruth, chapter 2, verse 22, it says in here, and Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you should go out with Boaz's young men, lest another field you be assaulted. And so she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and the wheat harvests. And so in this, we see the danger and the destitution that Ruth and Naomi would have been under, that they would have been easily assaulted by other people just looking for prey. They were marginalized. They were the least of the least, and they were among the poor. And yet, Naomi knows that this field is one of protection and possible redemption. And Boaz does step forward, and he does protect Ruth and Naomi, and he provides for them. And you can read the rest of the beautiful story. In fact, I'm going to be doing a Bible study that I have written on Ruth this coming summer that I hope you'll join me with. But until then, you read it for yourself and see the incredible way that God brought about of redemption, but also brought about provision and protection for Ruth. This pagan woman, this woman from a pagan land, and he brought her into this family of promise. And her name is written beside in this lineage of Jesus found in the New Testament. We see Ruth and Boaz, and she is going to be in the lineage of King David and in the lineage of King Jesus. How beautiful for us to know today that it doesn't matter where you've come from. It doesn't matter your family line. It doesn't matter how poor, how far away from God you are. We don't bring anything to the table except our faith. Our faith that Jesus is our kinsman redeemer. Us, far away from him, a foreigner in our sin, on the margins, the poorest of the poor, with nothing to offer except Christ, sees us working in the field of sin and shame and poverty. And he sees us with eyes of love, and he comes for us. Even though we seem unlikely, even though we seem the most undeserving, like we talked about with Rahab, God has eyes for us, and he is for us and not against us. And so today, I pray you'll be encouraged that even if you feel far away in the backside of the field, gleaning and working and sweating and trying your hardest to figure out a way to make your life better, to make your family work, and you are discouraged and it seems hopeless, know you have a kinsman redeemer, one who is coming for you, who has come for you, and who will keep you in perfect peace. One who will draw you in and give his promised son to you and to me, so that we may be reconciled into his family by faith. By faith, Ruth followed what Naomi said. By faith, she believed in God, and by faith, she obeyed. And by faith, she was brought into the family of promise, into Christ's very own family tree. So today I pray that you and I will hang tight to the encouragement of Ruth, and that we'll know, no matter what our circumstances tell us, no matter what our past and our family tree yells and screams at us, that we could never be a part of a family that loves us. We could never deserve the forgiveness and the redemption and the salvation of a beautiful, incredible, loving, holy God. Jesus Christ comes, and he pays the ransom, and he brings you in, and he becomes your and my Redeemer. I'll see you tomorrow.